We are out here today with the 2022 Harley-Davidson Nightster. This comes following Harley-Davidson's Sportster S launch, which was a huge departure from traditional Sportster form. Now we see Harley both demonstrating the versatility of that platform and returning to a more traditional Sportster-looking bike, which is so rad. So here we are with the bike in person. Let's get into sort of what Harley-Davidson has done with this bike and the technology that's hiding behind this traditional form. So obviously this new bike is built on the Revolution Max platform. It's a similar engine that we see in the Pan America and in the Sportster S, which is a load-bearing component in this chassis. However, pretty much everything else is updated and unique for this bike. The engine is a 975cc V-twin, 60-degree, liquid-cooled. It was balanced differently than the other two in order to give it a unique character for this bike. In order to meet performance requirements, there is a downdraft intake system that is underneath this steel cover. So this is not a gas tank, it's just a cover. If you look here, you will see you've got a gas filler underneath the seat. But it allows the new bike to carry its weight very low. Harley claims that this bike wet weighs 481 pounds. And when you pick it up off of the side stand, that is very apparent. It feels very well balanced. You know, it feels just, I haven't gotten to ride it, but I'm excited to because the way it carries its weight just at a stop makes me feel like it's going to handle really well. There are several performance benefits that we're going to see that come from moving that airbox underneath the steel cover and putting the gas tank beneath the seat here. It lowers the center of gravity, and it's also a more efficient intake system to improve performance of the engine. But along with that, you have the 3.1 gallon gas tank located right here. On a bike where styling is so important and Harley-Davidson is moving back to that traditional aesthetic, it seems like sort of a strange choice to put this big bulbous bladder in such an obvious and apparent position. Harley-Davidson claims that this engine puts out 90 horsepower and 70 pound-feet, which is a step down from the 1250, but a significant step up from an air-cooled Evo. Looking at the handlebars here as they compare to the Sportster S, you see an analog gauge also are a bit more simple. You don't have the heated grip controls. As you don't have the digital display, you don't have the media controls on the left side. So you do still have sort of a chunky housing here, but it doesn't have as many buttons and quite as much going on as the S does. Sportster fans are going to be familiar with the Nightster name. This is something that Harley-Davidson introduced in the mid-2000s, and then it was sort of followed up by the Iron and then by the 48, all sort of carrying on that bobbed fender, tight modern aesthetic with a blacked out engine. So now, rather than keeping the 48 or Iron name, Harley-Davidson has decided to bring back the Nightster name and sort of revamp this platform with something that we're familiar with from the past, sort of an iconic Sportster model, and something that was a good seller for the motor company. So some things that Harley-Davidson has done to sort of return this back to a very classic Sportster form are the rectangular steel swing arm. You have the outboard shocks here, which look to be longer than a traditional 883. They look about the length of a Sportster Roadster that we've seen in the past. So that picks it up a little bit more. You have mid-mounted foot controls. Again, the classic shape of the cover here, but that is just a cover. And while from this angle, dead on the side, it looks really good and it does look sort of like a traditional gas tank. When you sneak up on the bike and you look from a forward angle, you can see wiring, you can see components tucked underneath there, and it doesn't really have the same classic aesthetic that you do with a front tanked bike. Up front, you have 41mm Showa dual bending valve suspension. This is non-adjustable, similar suspension that we've seen to Harley-Davidson's touring line with the dual bending valve technology, something we've really enjoyed. It's always performed well in our testing. Out back, these dual outboard shocks are preload adjustable. If you take a look here, you can see there's a lot of adjustability there for the preload. You can really tighten that down and just stiffen it up if you want to. When you sit on the Harley-Davidson Sportster S, the bike really disappears from in front of you. Traditional Harley, you have the dash, the gauge, everything is right in front of you when you ride. And the seating position of this is much more similar to that traditional style than to the Sportster S. You know, you do have the gauge system, the headlight cowl, and everything sort of in front of you here that you can look at and see and experience while you're riding, as opposed to that S, which it sort of drops out and you're just aggressively in front, just looking down at the front wheel. some things that we can hope to see when we ride this bike. Given the more traditional wheel sizing, we believe that it should be a bit more nimble. That narrower front tire, we imagine, won't be quite as twitchy, quite as immediately responsive in the turns, but should drop in a little bit easier and allow entering those turns to be a little bit more fluid. So obviously with the Harley-Davidson, so much of the presence of the bike is in its sound and feel, which is a lot of the appeal of ownership. So let's get into the Nightster's exhaust note and the engine vibration. Harley-Davidson was very intentional in not perfectly balancing this engine to retain some of that classic Sportster feel. Let's start it up and see how they did. Okay, it's a low note, sounds a bit faster, a bit smoother than an air-cooled Evo. You get a little bit of pulse from the engine here in the seat, not a lot of vibration. Same with the bars, pretty smooth, a little bit of pulse. There's a middle zone in the revs where you do get some of the vibration, but even just going a little bit, it seems like it starts to smooth out. So it's definitely a different note, different sound than the Sportster S. It's a way different sound than an air-cooled Evo Sportster. So let us know what you think of the note in the comments. And if you get a chance to ride one of these when they become available, let us know what you think of the vibration and how Harley did with tuning that. All right, that is it for our exclusive first look at the 2022 Harley-Davidson Nightster. This bike retails at the starting MSRP of $13,499 in vivid black. If you'd like one of the color options, like the gray seen here, or the red, that'll be $13,899. At the end of this month, we are heading to the press ride, where we will be reporting back with a full review for you on cycleworld.com, so stay tuned to find that there. We hope you like what we're doing. If you do, like, follow, subscribe, and we will see you on the next video.